The sound of a suitcase zipper slices through the quiet morning air. It's the kind of sound that usually means vacation or excitement. But not today. Today, it sounds like an ending. Jenny's hands tremble as she folds the same clothes she once unpacked with hope. Every shirt, every scarf carries a memory of a promise that never became peace. In the next room, Sumit is humming while making chai, thinking it's just another ordinary morning. But this is the morning that changes everything. Welcome, this is Sabrina, and you're watching TLC Drama Live. If you've ever believed that love can survive anything, this moment might shake that belief. Stay with me till the end and tell me in the comments, was Jenny right to walk away, or did love deserve one more fight? The camera catches her slow movements. Her silence heavy with everything she's never said out loud. She doesn't cry, she doesn't scream, she just packs. That quiet is louder than any argument they've ever had. This isn't about anger anymore. It's about survival. The woman who crossed oceans for love now looks like someone preparing for exile. Sumit hums an old Bollywood tune from the kitchen, a habit from calmer days. He pours 2 cups of chai, one for himself, and one for the woman who, right now, is planning to leave him forever. The irony is painful. While he's adding sugar to her cup, she's silently removing herself from his life. He calls out, cheerful, completely unaware. Jenny doesn't answer. She sits on the edge of the bed, staring at the half-filled suitcase. It's not the first time she's thought about leaving, but it's the first time she's doing it without fear. She looks around the room that once felt like love's final destination. Now, it feels like a cage built out of patience and disappointment. The air is still, like the house itself knows it's about to lose its heartbeat. Sometimes silence says what 1,000 arguments never can. When someone stops explaining, it usually means they've already made their decision. Jenny whispers under her breath, almost as if confessing to herself. She's not angry at Sumit. She's tired of fighting battles she never started. His family's disapproval, the cultural gap, the endless waiting for acceptance, it's all carved into her face now. Every wrinkle, every sigh, every sleepless night tells the same story. Love isn't enough when it keeps asking you to break yourself to prove it. Meanwhile, Sumit wipes his hands and walks toward the bedroom. He's still smiling, holding both cups. He doesn't know this will be the last time he ever calls her baby in that soft morning tone. He steps in and freezes. Jenny's back is turned, but the suitcase says it all. His lips part, but no sound comes out. For a second, he looks like he's forgotten how to breathe. Jenny turns slowly. Her eyes meet his. No dialogue, no drama, just that unbearable look between 2 people who finally understand what the other one can't say. She loves him, but she's done breaking herself to stay. He loves her, but he never fought enough to make her feel safe. Sumit takes one hesitant step forward, unsure whether to touch her or stay still. The cups shake in his hands, chai spilling down his fingers. Jenny blinks and a tear slips out. Quiet, almost embarrassed. It's not a cry for attention. It's grief leaving her body. When love starts to feel like survival, it stops being love. It becomes endurance. The crew, sensing something is happening, starts filming without direction. The camera focuses on Jenny's trembling hands, the chai dripping from Sumit's fingers, the distance between them that used to be filled with laughter. The silence stretches, the kind that fills your stomach with dread even before you know why. Jenny takes a deep breath, as if inhaling courage. The morning light falls across her face, soft but cold. You can almost see the thought forming in her eyes. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for things to change. Maybe it's time to choose peace over promises. Sumit still hasn't spoken. He's staring at the suitcase, realizing what it means. His heartbeat is the only sound left. And Jenny, still calm, still trembling, looks back at him one last time before she whispers, barely audible, "I'm sorry." The words don't even reach him yet, but they will. And when they do, they'll break more than just his heart. They'll shatter the illusion that love can fix what's already gone numb. The moment you realize the person you love has already left you emotionally, even before they walk out the door, that's the kind of pain you never forget. Now the question isn't whether she'll leave, it's whether he'll finally understand why she had to. When Jenny first arrived in India, it felt like stepping into a dream she had waited her entire life to live. The noise, the colors, the smells, everything pulsed with the excitement of a new beginning. She had left behind her comfort zone, her family, her old life, all for one man and one belief, that love could conquer anything. Every challenge felt romantic back then. Every delay in paperwork, every fight with Sumit's family, every cultural misunderstanding seemed like a test she was willing to pass for their forever. Back then, she wasn't tired. She was hopeful. There were nights when she and Sumit would sit on the balcony, sipping chai and laughing at how the world doubted them. They thought love made them invincible. The age gap didn't matter. The judgment didn't matter. The whispers didn't matter. What mattered was that they had found something pure, something rare. Jenny would say, "People search their whole lives for love like this," and Sumit would smile like a man who believed her. It was their fairy tale, until reality moved in and refused to leave. Love feels eternal when it's new. But when the world keeps reminding you that you don't belong, that eternity starts to shrink. The shift wasn't sudden. It happened slowly, like a leak in the ceiling you try to ignore until the water drips on your face. One day, Sumit's mother stopped visiting. Then his father made it clear Jenny would never be part of their family. Friends started fading away, invitations stopped coming, and the city that once felt alive began to feel like a test she could never pass. Jenny kept saying things would change. She believed it. She waited through every disappointment, every rejection, and every awkward family meeting that ended with tears. Sumit always promised he'd fix it. He'd talk to them again, convince them, try harder. But each time he said those words, Jenny felt a little piece of her trust fall away. His love was sincere, but his courage was fragile. The man she thought would fight for her started choosing silence over confrontation. And Jenny learned that silence can hurt more than any insult. There were moments she tried to convince herself she was overthinking, when he'd make her dinner, or bring her small gifts, or tell her how much he loved her. For a while, that was enough. But those gestures started to feel like bandages on a wound that never closed. What she needed wasn't romance. It was respect, belonging, and partnership. She didn't want to be a secret or a source of conflict. She wanted to be his family, not his rebellion. When love asks you to prove your worth again and again, eventually, you start to wonder if you were ever seen at all. Her days grew quieter. The neighbors' stares got colder. Even going out for groceries became a reminder that she didn't fit in. The small talk that once made her feel welcome now made her feel like a foreigner in her own home. She smiled less, spoke less, and eventually stopped hoping that anyone would ever call her Sumit's wife, with pride. Sumit, on the other hand, adjusted. He went to work, joked with friends, and told himself things were fine. But every time Jenny looked at him, she saw the distance growing. He still loved her, but he loved peace more. He loved avoiding confrontation more. That realization hit her harder than any fight they'd ever had. It wasn't one big betrayal that broke them. It was 1,000 tiny moments where Jenny felt alone while sitting next to the person she gave everything for. The morning chai that once symbolized togetherness became a ritual of habit, not connection. Her smile turned polite, her eyes distant. Sumit noticed, but instead of asking why, he told himself she'd be okay. She wasn't. The slowest kind of heartbreak is the one that doesn't announce itself. It just drains you drop by drop until one day, you're empty. By the time that quiet morning came, the one where she started packing, her love hadn't disappeared. It had simply reached its limit. Every compromise she'd made in the name of love had turned into evidence of her own erasure. She had stayed so long trying to prove she belonged that she forgot what belonging felt like. Jenny once believed she had found her forever home in India. What she didn't realize was that she was building that home on land that never accepted her foundation. And when the walls finally started to crack, no one else heard the sound. No one except her. Sumit's parents had always been the invisible third force in their relationship, the wall that never moved no matter how much love tried to push against it. From the first day Jenny met them, the tension was written across their faces. They didn't need to shout to make their disapproval clear. Every polite smile was tight, every question about her age a weapon disguised as curiosity. Jenny thought time would soften them, She believed that once they saw how happy Sumit was, they'd accept her. But time didn't heal. It hardened everything. In the early seasons, viewers watched those family confrontations unfold in real time. Sumit's mother crying, his father pleading, the family name being treated like a fragile heirloom that Jenny's presence might break. Each scene ended the same way, with Sumit caught in the middle, torn between two worlds. He'd nod at his parents out of guilt, then hold Jenny's hand out of love. But loyalty split in half eventually bleeds out. Jenny saw that long before he did. She kept telling herself he was doing his best, that changing old traditions takes time, that maybe one day his parents would look at her and see the woman who loved their son more than anyone ever could. But every visit, every phone call, every family event without an invitation chipped away at her faith. Being invisible hurts in silence, and Jenny became the quiet ghost of Sumit's love life, present but never acknowledged. When you spend years begging to be seen, invisibility starts to feel like a form of punishment. Sumit always said he wanted peace. Peace meant avoiding conflict, staying neutral, keeping both sides calm. But peace built on avoidance is never real. Every time he told his parents he'd think about it, or told Jenny, give them more time, he was choosing comfort over courage. Love without boundaries starts to rot. Jenny didn't want him to choose her over his family. She wanted him to stop making her feel like an intruder in her own marriage. There was a day that stands out. Sumit's mother visiting after months of silence. Jenny cleaned the house, cooked her best dishes, dressed modestly, tried everything to show respect. His mother barely looked at her. She spoke directly to Sumit, as if Jenny were invisible. When Jenny finally spoke up, the response was cold. "You are not one of us." It wasn't shouted, but it was final. And Sumit, standing between them, said nothing. His silence that day was louder than any insult. That night, Jenny didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly, realizing that love was supposed to make you feel protected, not erased. The next morning, she made breakfast for both of them, smiled like nothing was wrong, and kept going. That's what long-term pain looks like. It doesn't always explode, it dissolves. Love built on one person fighting while the other avoids the war will always end in exhaustion. Sumit's parents had made their stance clear. They would never bless this marriage, not now, not ever. He kept hoping they'd change, but hope without action is denial. He'd tell Jenny he was caught between love and duty. But duty without compassion is control, and love without action is cowardice. She started to see it, not as a choice between two people, but as a man afraid to disappoint anyone but her. Jenny's patience turned into silence, silence into detachment, detachment into survival. She began spending more time alone, cleaning, cooking, pretending everything was fine. But inside, she was crumbling. It wasn't the rejection that broke her, it was his unwillingness to protect her from it. Every time he said, "They're my parents, I can't lose them," she heard, "You're the one I can lose." There came a morning when she stopped waiting for him to defend her. She didn't announce it. She didn't cry. She simply started packing little by little, old habits of hope folded away next to old clothes. She looked at the wedding photos, the ones they took when it felt like the world had finally accepted them, and realized those smiles were built on borrowed time. Sometimes the final breaking point doesn't come from a fight. It comes from realizing the person you trusted to stand beside you never learned how. That was the morning everything changed. The morning Jenny decided she wouldn't keep waiting for approval that was never coming. What Sumit didn't know was that her silence wasn't peace anymore. It was her exit plan. And by the time he noticed, it was already too late. Something felt off the moment the cameras started rolling. The crew had filmed Jenny and Sumit countless mornings before, but this one felt heavier, slower. Jenny wasn't pacing or talking. She wasn't even looking at the camera. She moved quietly, like someone who had already said everything worth saying. The air in that small deli apartment felt still. Too still. Like the calm before a monsoon that everyone knows is coming, but no one dares to name. A producer whispered to another, "She hasn't spoken a word since we got here." Another replied softly, "Keep filming, this could be big." No one yet understood how final this silence would turn out to be. Jenny's hands were steady now. Every fold of fabric, every click of the suitcase latch carried intention. She had already cried too much in this house. Tears no longer helped. In the kitchen, Sumit stirred the chai, humming the same melody he'd hummed every morning for years. He didn't notice the shift in the air. He thought the quiet meant peace. For Jenny, it meant the end. The camera caught the soft reflection of her face in the wardrobe mirror. Calm, composed, but completely hollow. It was the kind of expression you see in people who've stopped waiting for miracles. When a person stops explaining themselves, it means they've already accepted the outcome. Sumit walked toward the bedroom, carrying the cups of tea. "Jenny, your chai's ready," he called, cheerful. No answer. He tried again, half smiling. "You're still mad about yesterday?" Still nothing. His smile faltered. The cameraman adjusted focus. They all felt it at once. The energy had shifted. He stepped into the room and froze. The suitcase on the bed looked like a confession. "What's this?" His voice cracked as he tried to keep it light, but his eyes had already begun to fill. Jenny looked up slowly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the fan and the distant noise of Delhi traffic. Sumit put the cups down, his hands shaking. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked quietly. Jenny didn't answer. She went back to folding a blouse, the same teal one she wore on her first trip to India. That small detail broke something inside him. He walked closer. "Jenny, talk to me. Did something happen? Did my parents say something again?" His voice carried panic now, the kind that comes when you sense the ground moving beneath your feet. Jenny finally looked at him. "I can't keep doing this." The words were soft, but they hit like thunder. Sumit blinked, confused. "Doing what?" "We were fine last night. We ate dinner. We laughed." She cut him off, her voice still calm but trembling at the edges. "We weren't fine. We were pretending. I was pretending. You can only act okay for so long before the truth starts spilling through your silence." Sumit took another step closer, desperation creeping in. "You're not leaving, right? Tell me you're not leaving." Jenny lowered her gaze. "I've tried, Sumit. I've waited. I've believed. I've given everything I had. But nothing changes." He ran his hands through his hair, pacing. "Please don't say that. We've survived everything. We can survive this too." His voice cracked again, but she didn't respond. She reached for the small Ganesh statue on her dresser, the one given to her by a neighbor years ago, and wrapped it gently in a piece of cloth. That tiny act said everything words couldn't. The crew stayed silent. The camera operator's hand trembled slightly, zooming in on Sumit's face as realization set in. His breathing quickened, his eyes darting from the suitcase to her face and back. "You don't mean it," he whispered. Jenny looked at him with the kind of sad patience only someone exhausted by love can have. "I do," she said finally. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but the weight of it filled the room. Sumit stumbled backward, clutching the edge of the dresser. "Jenny, no, you can't. Not after everything." He reached out, his hand hovering near her arm, afraid to touch her, afraid of what that touch might confirm. Jenny's silence answered for her. The fan kept spinning. The chai turned cold. The cameras kept rolling. Everyone in that room understood it now. This wasn't another fight. This was the ending they'd all felt coming for years, but never wanted to face. Sometimes love doesn't explode. It simply stops breathing while you're still standing in the same room. Sumit took a deep breath, his voice shaking. "Then at least tell me why today." "Why now?" Jenny didn't look up. "Because I woke up this morning and realized I wasn't afraid anymore." And with that, she zipped the suitcase closed. The sound echoed like a door slamming shut on 10 years of hope. Sumit stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. The suitcase sat open on the bed, half full, half final. His voice trembled when he finally spoke. "Where are you going?" Jenny's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "Home." The word landed between them like a stone. Sumit blinked, trying to understand. "Home. This is your home." Jenny shook her head slowly. "No, it isn't. Not anymore." He stepped forward, his panic rising. "Jenny, stop. Tell me what happened. Did someone say something? Did my mom call you again? Please, don't do this." She sighed, calm but heavy. Nothing happened today, Sumit. Everything already happened. I just finally accepted it. The hardest part of leaving isn't packing your things, it's realizing you've already left emotionally long before you start. Sumit's voice broke. You can't go like this. You can't throw away everything we fought for. Jenny met his eyes and whispered, I'm not throwing it away. I'm saving what's left of me. Her words were steady, but the tears finally escaped. He dropped to his knees beside the bed, clutching her hand. Jenny, please. We survived my parents, the gossip, the hate. We can fix this. I'll talk to them again. I'll do anything. She shook her head gently. You've been saying that for years. That sentence hit him like a physical blow. His grip loosened, his body folded forward as the weight of every broken promise pressed down. Then tell me what to do, he whispered. Tell me what you need. Jenny closed her eyes. I need peace, Sumit, and I can't find it here. He looked around the room, desperate for something to anchor him. The wedding photo on the wall, the scarf she wore when they filmed their first interview, the 2 empty cups of chai on the table. Everything around him was still theirs, but nothing felt alive. If you go now, you'll never come back, he said quietly. Jenny nodded. I know. Sometimes love turns into a mirror that shows you everything you gave up to keep it alive. Sumit rose slowly, pacing in circles. I can leave India with you. I'll come to America. We'll start again there. Jenny looked at him with sadness, not hope. You won't. You've said that before. You can't leave your family and they'll never accept me. He stopped moving. His silence was an answer he didn't want to say out loud. The room filled with the sound of Jenny closing her suitcase. Sumit covered his face, shaking. You said you'd never leave me, he said, muffled by his own hands. And you said we'd be equals, Jenny replied softly. But somehow, I was always the one waiting for you to be ready. He looked up, eyes red. I am ready now. Jenny smiled faintly. No, you're desperate now. There's a difference. When desperation replaces love, it's not connection anymore. It's fear of being left behind. Sumit reached for her again, grabbing her wrist gently. Please don't go alone. Let me come with you, at least to the airport. Jenny shook her head. You can't save me from this. You can only understand why I'm doing it. He collapsed onto the bed, staring at the floor. Then I failed you. She knelt beside him. No, you loved me in the way you knew how. But I needed more than love. I needed peace. The producer's camera captured the way her hand lingered on his shoulder for one final second before she stood. Sumit's lips trembled. I can't lose you. Jenny took a deep breath. You already did. You just didn't see it happening. The room went quiet again. Sumit's breathing came in short bursts, each one sounding like a sob he was trying to swallow. Jenny lifted her suitcase, pausing at the door. For a heartbeat, she looked back, her eyes soft but certain. Goodbye, Sumit. He didn't respond. He couldn't. The sound of her footsteps down the hall filled the space that used to hold laughter. The camera stayed on his face as he whispered to himself, She's not coming back. When love ends, it doesn't explode. It fades quietly, and by the time you notice, it's already gone. Jenny sat in the taxi with her hands clasped together, watching the city blur past. It didn't feel like escape. It felt like survival. For years, she had believed that love was enough to hold everything together, that if she tried harder, stayed longer, proved herself over and over, things would change. But she wasn't leaving because she stopped loving Sumit. She was leaving because loving him had turned into an act of self-defense. The line between devotion and destruction had disappeared somewhere between another argument with his parents and another night pretending she was fine. What began as a fairy tale about conquering distance and culture had quietly transformed into a daily struggle to stay emotionally alive. Her heart wasn't broken in one blow. It had been worn down by 1,000 small disappointments. Each apology, each delay, each unfulfilled promise had chipped away until there was nothing left but exhaustion. When you spend years fighting for peace, one day you wake up and realize the only way to find it is to stop fighting. The truth is, Jenny's story isn't unique in the 90-day world. Fans have seen this pattern before. Couples who cross oceans for love often find that the real battles start after the cameras stop rolling. It happened when Danielle finally stopped chasing Mohammed's affection, when Natalie realized Mike's silence was louder than his words, when Kalani's tears turned into quiet acceptance that love wasn't supposed to hurt every day. These stories repeat because emotional burnout looks the same, no matter where it happens. You keep giving until giving starts to feel like losing yourself. Jenny's quiet was the final symptom of that burnout. She didn't slam doors or throw accusations. She simply stopped asking for what she'd already asked 100 times. That kind of silence isn't coldness. It's clarity. It's the moment a person realizes that staying hopeful has become another form of denial. Sumit's mistake wasn't that he didn't love her. It's that he believed love could survive without change. He thought time would heal, that patience would somehow make his parents accept her, that Jenny's sacrifices would one day feel worth it. But love doesn't thrive in waiting rooms. It dies there slowly, while both people tell themselves things will get better next week, next month, next year. Jenny finally stopped waiting. Burnout doesn't look like anger. It looks like indifference. It's when you stop fighting because you've run out of fight, not because you've stopped caring. From a distance, viewers might see Jenny's decision as harsh, even cruel. But if you look closer, you see something else. A woman choosing peace over pain. For years, she let love convince her that suffering was proof of commitment. Now she knew better. Love isn't supposed to drain you. It's supposed to grow you. When every compromise feels like surrender, walking away isn't giving up. It's coming back to yourself. Inside that taxi, Jenny whispered something the microphones barely caught. "I still love him." She said it softly, like an admission, not a plea. Because love wasn't the problem. It was everything that came with it. The shame, the judgment, the endless waiting for a family's approval that would never come. Love became a cage she built herself, thinking it was home. There comes a point when even the deepest love can't survive the absence of peace. That's the moment survival replaces hope. Jenny's reflection in the window looked older, stronger, and strangely peaceful. She wasn't leaving to punish him. She was leaving because she couldn't keep punishing herself by staying. Some heartbreaks aren't meant to be healed by reunion. They're meant to teach you that self-respect is the last form of love you can offer when everything else is gone. As the taxi turned toward the airport road, she stopped looking back. She had already done enough looking back for one lifetime. The taxi idled outside the gate, its engine humming under the rising Delhi heat. The driver tapped the steering wheel, unaware that history was being filmed a few feet away. Jenny stepped out of the building, suitcase in hand, her movements slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. The crew trailed behind her, cameras steady but hearts heavy. They'd followed this couple for years, through tears, laughter, weddings, and fights, but never this kind of silence. Sumit appeared in the doorway seconds later, barefoot, his shirt half-buttoned, eyes wide in disbelief. He wasn't performing for the cameras. He wasn't talking. He was simply moving through panic, chasing the life that was already slipping away. The crew captured everything, the way his hands shook, the way his breathing quickened as he stumbled across the gravel path. He didn't even notice the cuts forming on his feet. He only saw her back. Jenny reached the gate first. The guard stepped aside quietly, understanding without words that this was not an ordinary farewell. The taxi driver stepped out to help with the luggage, but the look on Jenny's face made him hesitate. She wasn't a tourist leaving a country. She was a woman leaving a decade of her life behind. She placed the suitcase by the car, exhaled, and for a moment, her knees nearly gave out. When someone reaches the point of no return, their body always knows it before their heart does. The crew's audio caught faint sounds. Sumit's breath, the soft scrape of gravel under his feet, the whisper of the wind against the gate. The camera zoomed in as he reached her, his expression torn between pleading and disbelief. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just stood there, eyes locked on her face, realizing that every promise he'd made now hung uselessly in the air. The producer motioned for the team to keep distance. This wasn't a scene to control. This was truth unfolding in real time. One camera focused on Jenny's trembling hand as she reached for the car door handle. Another caught Sumit's reflection in the taxi window, his face pressed against glass, eyes red, mouth open but voiceless. The driver looked between them, unsure whether to start the car. Jenny gave a small nod. barely perceptible, but final. The sound of the door opening felt louder than the traffic outside. She slid inside, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Sumit's hand hit the window softly, not in anger, but as if trying to hold the moment in place. Inside the car, Jenny's face was pale, her lips trembling. The camera caught the tears streaming down, catching the light. Outside, Sumit leaned against the car, shaking his head, his shoulders trembling under the weight of realization. For the first time in years, no one said a word. Even the crew had lowered their cameras for a few seconds, unable to hide their own emotion. Sometimes heartbreak is so raw that even the people paid to film it forget they're part of a show. The driver started the engine. The car jerked slightly, then rolled forward. Sumit took a few steps alongside it, stumbling, his voice cracking into the humid air, but no microphone was needed to understand his pain. Jenny didn't turn around. The reflection of her face in the rear window said enough. Eyes shut, jaw tight, breath shallow. She wasn't being cold. She was surviving the moment that would define the rest of her life. The car picked up speed, moving down the narrow street. Sumit's figure grew smaller in the rear glass, until it vanished completely behind a wall of dust and light. The crew inside the following car stayed silent, filming through the windshield as the taxi disappeared. The city noise returned slowly, swallowing the echo of what had just happened. Back at the gate, Sumit collapsed onto the ground, his face hidden in his hands. One of the producers hesitated before walking over. He whispered something off mic, something that didn't need to be repeated. The cameras captured him from a distance, a man sitting in the ruins of everything he thought love would protect. Every great love story has a sound when it ends. For them, it was a closing door and the hum of a taxi fading into traffic. The footage would later be called the most heartbreaking moment in 90-day Fiancé history. But in that instant, it wasn't a headline. It was two people caught between love and freedom, choosing in opposite directions. The city outside the taxi window looked nothing like the India Jenny once fell in love with. The same streets, the same smells, the same sounds, but all drained of warmth. The driver asked quietly, "Airport, madam?" She nodded, unable to speak. Her throat burned from holding back everything she wanted to scream. The camera inside the car stayed steady, capturing the glint of sunlight on her tears. Each turn of the wheel felt like a memory passing by. The market where she and Sumit once laughed over cheap jewelry, the corner shop where he'd buy her favorite tea, the tiny park where they used to sit on Sundays, pretending they had no problems waiting back home. Now, those same places looked like reminders of promises that didn't last. Jenny pressed her hand against the cold window, watching the streets fade into motion blur. It wasn't regret that filled her. It was grief. She had imagined leaving before, but it had always been a threat, not a choice. Today, it was real. She whispered softly, "I didn't want it to end like this." The producer sitting beside her stayed silent. Some moments are too human to interrupt. The hardest part of walking away is knowing the person you're leaving behind isn't the villain. They're the reason you stayed so long. She remembered their first meeting in real life after years of online calls. The nervous smiles, the way he held her hand as if it were proof against the world's judgment. For a long time, that love had felt brave. Now it just felt tired. There's a difference between love that fights for you and love you have to fight for every day. Jenny had lived on the wrong side of that difference for too long. Outside, Delhi traffic moved in its usual chaos, honking, shouting, motion everywhere. Inside the taxi, everything was still. Jenny reached for her phone, scrolling through old photos. Sumit's smile in their wedding picture looked real, but now she wondered if that joy had been for the cameras or for her. Reality TV makes love look larger than life, but when the lights go off, the cost of that exposure becomes painfully small. Back at the apartment gate, Sumit hadn't moved. The crew filmed from a respectful distance. He sat on the ground, his head buried in his hands, rocking slightly. No one told him what to do. The producer whispered, "Let him be." The sound of his breath, ragged and uneven, filled the boom mic. It was the sound of a man who had just learned what silence truly means. He looked up at last, his eyes searching the empty street where the taxi had disappeared. The city around him kept moving, vendors shouting, scooters passing, kids laughing, but his world had stopped. The cameras didn't zoom in this time. They stayed wide, showing the smallness of one man in a crowd that didn't care. Love on television gives millions a story, but for the people living it, the ending always costs more than the audience ever sees. Jenny's taxi merged onto the highway. She turned away from the window and stared ahead, her reflection floating against the blur of passing lights. She wasn't thinking about America yet. She was thinking about him kneeling by the suitcase, about his voice cracking when he said her name. It wasn't anger she felt, it was sorrow, thick and suffocating. People would call her strong for leaving, but she didn't feel strong. She felt like someone who had loved too deeply to hate and too long to stay. The decision to walk away hadn't come from strength. It came from exhaustion. You don't leave because you stop caring. You leave because you've cared yourself into nothing. Public love always looks romantic until it breaks. Then it turns into content, and heartbreak becomes a headline. By the time Jenny reached the airport gates, her tears had dried. She paid the driver, lifted her suitcase, and paused for one final look at the city skyline. Somewhere behind those lights, Sumit was still sitting on the ground. She didn't know if he'd ever forgive her. She didn't know if she'd ever forgive herself. For the first time in years, no one was telling her what to do. No producers, no family, no expectations, just silence. The kind that used to scare her, but now sounded almost like peace. The footage aired weeks later, and the reaction was instant. Fans flooded social media with disbelief, grief, and fury. Some blamed Sumit, calling him weak for never cutting the cord with his family. Others called Jenny selfish, claiming she gave up after getting what she wanted. But the truth, as always, sat in the quiet space between those arguments, the space where love ends long before people admit it. Clips of the breakup spread like wildfire. The moment the taxi door closed, replayed millions of times on TikTok and YouTube. Viewers zoomed in on every expression, every breath, every tear. Some swore they saw regret in Jenny's eyes, others saw relief. A few said Sumit's collapse was staged, but those who've ever lost someone without closure recognized it for what it was. Shock in its rawest form. When love ends on camera, the audience doesn't just watch, they take sides, projecting their own heartbreak onto strangers who once felt untouchable. Jenny didn't give interviews right away. Her Instagram stayed quiet for weeks until she finally posted a photo of a sunset with no caption. That single image ignited endless speculation. Was she in America again? Was it over for good? In the comments, fans fought about what freedom means. Some calling her brave, others calling her cold. Every opinion said more about the people posting than about her. Because when people watch a love story unravel, they don't see two individuals. They see themselves, their own relationships, their own regrets reflected back. Sumit stayed off camera, his silence becoming a story in itself. Tabloids claimed he'd stopped filming with TLC. A few leaked reports suggested he was still in India, avoiding the press. In one blurry photo from a market, he looked thinner, distracted, as if carrying the weight of something too big to explain. It wasn't guilt alone. It was realization. He had spent years trying to please everyone and ended up losing the one person who actually stood by him. Online, the debate became louder than the breakup itself. Was Jenny right to leave after a decade of fighting for the same respect? Or was leaving proof that love dies the moment self-preservation begins? Fans divided themselves into camps. Team Jenny, Team Sumit, forgetting that there was no winner here. This wasn't a battle. It was grief broadcast to millions, with no pause button for the people actually living it. We like to believe love can survive anything, because if it can't, then maybe ours can't either. That's why people defend couples like Jenny and Sumit. They want proof that endurance means success. But Jenny's decision broke that illusion. She reminded everyone that endurance without happiness isn't love. It's survival. And survival isn't romantic. It's lonely, it's messy, and it's what most people won't admit they're doing. Her departure wasn't a betrayal of love, it was a confession of limits. Sumit's silence only made the story heavier. For years, he'd been the one explaining, apologizing, defending. Now he said nothing. That quiet became louder than any statement he could have made. When a person who always tries to fix everything finally stops talking, it's not peace, it's defeat. Weeks after the episode aired, Jenny posted another update, a short video of her walking near a beach. She smiled once, briefly, then turned the camera toward the water. No words, no context. Fans filled the comments with questions she never answered. Maybe she didn't owe anyone those answers. Maybe the story had already said what it needed to. Leaving doesn't always mean walking away from someone. It can mean walking back to the parts of yourself you buried trying to stay. For viewers, the shock eventually faded, replaced by reflection. They began to understand that Jenny and Sumit weren't just characters in a TV show. They were proof of how love and culture, age and loyalty, can clash in ways that no one can fix. It was a story that forced people to look at their own relationships and ask, if love requires this much pain, what am I holding on to? By the time TLC released the next teaser hinting at what comes next, one thing was clear. Jenny hadn't just left India. She had left the version of herself that believed love without boundaries was still love. And somewhere in Delhi, Sumit was learning what life feels like when the person who carried your hope decides to carry herself instead. Jenny's story didn't end at the airport. It continued in quiet rooms, in new cities, in the space between memory and freedom. She stopped appearing in photos with the bright, wide smile fans knew so well. There was peace in her face now, but it came at a cost. That's what most people missed. Peace always costs something. In the months that followed, Jenny found herself rebuilding the version of her life she'd left behind years earlier. For the first time in over a decade, no one was watching her every move. No cameras, no confessionals, no waiting for approval from anyone. She wasn't the American wife or the controversial couple. She was simply a woman trying to remember who she was before love became a full-time job. Her decision became more than a breakup. It became a quiet rebellion against everything that told her to keep sacrificing. Fans who once criticized her started understanding her. They saw their own stories reflected in hers. The moments they stayed too long, explained too much, forgave too often. She became a mirror for anyone who ever loved harder than they were loved back. Sometimes choosing yourself looks like betrayal, but it's actually self-respect finally finding its voice. Sumit's silence stretched on for weeks before a small update surfaced online. He hadn't spoken publicly, but close friends said he'd withdrawn from filming. TLC insiders hinted that he was in talks with producers, debating whether to return for a solo segment. Behind those reports, though, was a man trying to piece together a life without the person who had been both his comfort and his controversy. Jenny's choice hit deeper than anyone expected. It exposed the emotional math that so many couples hide. How long can love survive when only one person keeps paying the cost? In relationships built under public scrutiny, the line between love and performance blurs. Every argument becomes an episode, every tear a scene. And when the cameras stop, the silence is deafening. That's why her departure felt bigger than one story. It was a reminder that self-worth and love don't always coexist. You can adore someone completely and still know they aren't your piece. You can miss them every day and still be right to walk away. Leaving isn't the opposite of loving. It's proof that love alone isn't enough when peace keeps losing the fight. As months passed, fans noticed something unexpected. Jenny didn't vanish. She started posting glimpses of new places, local food, stray animals, small joys that had nothing to do with heartbreak. They weren't announcements of a new beginning. They were signs that healing doesn't always need to be loud. Sumit, meanwhile, remained in the same house, the same streets, the same routines. Without Jenny's presence, the silence grew heavier. It's one thing to fear losing someone, it's another to live with the echo after they're gone. People close to him said he replayed their scenes again and again, searching for the exact moment where he could have chosen differently. The world had already moved on to new couples, new drama, new heartbreaks. But somewhere between the edits and episodes, the truth remained. Their story wasn't about failure, it was about limits. About knowing when the fight to be accepted turns into the fight to survive. Jenny didn't leave because she stopped believing in love. She left because she finally believed in herself. Her story, stripped of the noise and the showmanship, was a simple one. Love can be real and still not be right. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is stop proving your worth to someone who already knows it but can't value it. So when the credits rolled on their season and the audience debated who was wrong, the real answer was quieter. No one wins in a love that keeps asking you to shrink. The question she left behind still lingers. How do you choose between hurting the person you love and hurting yourself by staying? I'm Sabrina, and this is TLC Drama Live. Jenny's story might have ended in that taxi, but the truth behind it is far from over. Because somewhere in Delhi, Sumit is still facing the silence she left behind. And according to sources close to production, TLC isn't done with their story yet. The network may already be planning a follow-up that could change everything we think we know about how far love can bend before it breaks. Stay close, because what Sumit does next might be the twist no one saw coming.